We're here with Emily Merkley. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the Washington County Board of Realtors and the MLS, or the Multiple Listing Service. She is the most qualified person to talk about the real estate market here in Washington County, and I was able to get an interview with her. Emily, how has the real estate market been in Washington County over the last few years?
Crazy. A little chaotic. So over the past few years, we saw prices accelerating at rates that we've never really seen before. And a lot of that was due to demand in the market, incredibly low interest rates that expanded people's purchasing power, multiple offers, people purchasing homes above asking prices. That was our COVID market and even just post-pandemic market.
Right. And it seems like nationwide that kind of happened, right?
Yes.
But here in Washington County, being the fastest growing metro in the nation, right, it was to the nth degree. It was crazy.
Yes, we saw a huge influx of people coming to Utah for a couple of reasons. Taxes are lower here compared to other states. We have immense outdoor recreation that when people were forced to stay inside here, there were opportunities to get outside and recreate. Housing prices were lower compared to where people were coming. In fact, our multiple listing service saw an increase of interest from states like Washington, Oregon, California, Colorado, Virginia, Washington, D.C., places where taxes are higher, home prices were higher. So the move here, this was appealing to them, right? This was a more affordable option.
Where do we see actually the most people coming from? It seems like most people that are moving here now are from northern Utah. Is that a good assumption?
Most of our migration is still coming from inside the state, but we are seeing migration from outside the state. In fact, where I purchased in Washington City, my neighbor was from Alabama, retired. Their kids are in California. They found a place in the middle where they could expand their retirement, and Washington County fit the bill for them.
How has 2024 been this year so far, and how do you expect it to change or stay the same through the rest of the year?
It's interesting looking at the data in the multiple listing service. We can see that conditions in 2024 are very similar to 2023. And unless something significant happens in the real estate market, I actually don't expect that to change this year. So the number of homes coming on the market are pretty consistent with this time last year. The number of homes being sold are pretty consistent with this time last year. Sellers are still seeing about 97 to 98% sold price compared to what their list price is. So sellers are still being able to fetch near their list price for their home.
That's good to know. So like days on market for listings though, is that about the same as well?
It is about the same as last year, but not even close to where it was in the pandemic market. So we're sitting right about 61 days right now. In a pandemic market, we saw it get as low as 15, right? And so, but 60 is actually more realistic. It's an indicator of a more stable market. Our month supply of inventory is at about from 3 to 4, which again is very good. But again, that could all change given a significant change to, say, interest rates. In Utah, we're about 48,000 homes short of the demand. And so there is a pool of buyers that are waiting for ideal conditions to enter the market. And one of those things being interest rates dropping, which you can see why the feds are now hesitant to do that with so much pent-up demand. If the market was then to flood with this huge pool of buyers, we would see home prices accelerate again, putting housing affordability even more out of reach.
Right. What is the affordability of a home in Washington County compared to other parts of the country?
I mean, looking at our MLS, we still have properties that are priced, in the $200,000 to $400,000 range. But everybody's idea of affordability is a little bit different. What I consider affordable is going to be less than $300,000, right? And that's based on the area median income, what people can afford, and not be cost burdened by their housing. But I think if you spoke to somebody else, their idea of what would be affordable is in the $500,000 range or more. When we look at housing affordability, we have to look at the area median income, what that supports, what housing prices are and what options exist. It's getting harder and harder for a Utah family to survive off of one income.
What are some of the things the cities are doing? Is there anything they can do?
Yes, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but a lot of the issues that we face in terms of the costs for housing are directly impacted by city regulation. There's this idea that we want government to stay out, but in order to pull back government regulation, it has to be through the government process.
Right.
And so I think we're really lucky in Utah. We have a very strong culture of organizations like the Realtor Association, like the Home Builders Association, who have advocacy groups that advocate on a local, state, and national level in support of housing opportunities, housing affordability, deregulating to drive down the costs for building, programs for low income. Governor Cox, this last legislative session, put forth some really amazing bills to support builders, to support low-income families, and to support first-time homebuyers getting into a home.
What advice would you give to somebody looking to relocate to Washington County?
My first suggestion would be to connect with a local realtor. A realtor has an immense knowledge of the local area, market conditions, amenities that you might be looking for, and what housing options exist in your budget range. My second piece of advice would be to get your finances in order. Understand what your purchasing power is, what your needs are, where you cap, and how much you can invest in housing.
There are a lot of people sitting on the sidelines not buying real estate right now because they assume pricing is going to go down. Is that going to happen?
I don't think so. Again, the whole supply and demand conversation, right? There is 48,000 buyers in Utah waiting for an opportunity to get into the market. And we did see a slight reduction in home prices in 2023, but a lot of that came because people took a step back, right? Interest rates are rising. I don't know where they're going to stop. Now's not the time. But as we kind of settled into these interest rates, more people have entered the market. And so far this year, we're seeing almost 9% increase in home values. And we anticipate that trend will continue, not at the rate that we saw during the pandemic when we were seeing 26, 27, 28% appreciation, but we're holding pretty steady at about 8 to 9% right now.
So what are some other notable statistics in our current market?
So one that I think is also really promising is that new construction has ramped up. Typically, we used to see anywhere from 20 to 25% new construction homes on the market, but now we're seeing 35+%. So that's a good sign in terms of bringing more options. We do need more options in the lower price points. Your $300,000, $350,000, $400,000 price point. And we do have builders and developers here in Washington County that are working hard to make that happen.
As you look to the future, what kind of growth is Washington County expecting?
So much. I saw a statistic that said that by 2060, we should increase to 464,000 residents. That is far more than double. We're currently sitting at about 187,000. So growth is coming, growth is anticipated, it's expected.
If we're going to more than double in the next few years or 40 years, how does that affect current residents that are living here and people that are moving here?
It's inevitable. It will affect the residents that currently live here and have been living here for some time. But what they have here is great, and other people want it. And if we stand in the way of progress, then we're essentially pricing our own children out of the opportunity for themselves to be here.
Right.
We need to be more supportive of our local municipalities when they try to create opportunities for different housing types instead of speak out against them. We need to pull back from that mentality that I don't want that in my backyard, but realize diversity is beautiful,
Right.
and everybody has to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think if you're expecting that kind of growth, you're going to have new roads, a lot more infrastructure, more schools, and that all has to be paid for somehow.
And it's better to plan for that and prepare for that now than to have the growth and then say, whoa, we've got a problem.
Right, yeah.
it takes 40 minutes for everybody to get to work. And it's kind of the cycle of cities and towns. When it becomes less affordable to stay close, people move out, right? And then when it gets too expensive to commute, they're looking for jobs elsewhere. We need to have options here that cater to all income levels so that we are able to still utilize the services that enhance the quality of our lives, right? Medical services, dining.
Right. So with all these people moving here, the popular question is there enough water?
I am not the authority on water, but I do know that the Water Conservation District is aware. They're planning for it, they're preparing for it. And there are other organizations that exist too, like the home builders and the realtor organization that are helping advocate with the local cities to put in water policies that don't take away a homeowner's rights, but helps to combat the water issues that we're facing.
Yeah, I have noticed that a lot of cities now, a lot of homeowners are putting in turf. Right?
Turf replacement program, yeah.
And these are all things that are happening all over the place. So it may look like grass, but it's not being watered.
Right.
So everybody's discussing the National Association of Realtors settlement that happened earlier this year. How is that going to impact buyers and how are they going to buy real estate in the future?
Very little, actually. Utah has actually been operating in a transparent fashion for decades. There have been contracts and forms for sellers that identified services and what the compensation was going to be. And there were forms for buyers determining what the services were and what the compensation and how the compensation was paid. Other states are starting from scratch. Would you go to court to defend yourself?
No.
Would you try to diagnose and treat yourself without the help of a medical professional? There's so much risk involved in a real estate transaction, many things that can go wrong that can be costly. And this is generally one of the biggest financial transactions a buyer will participate in their lifetime. It's good to have representation. It's good to have somebody that knows the forms and contracts, adheres to the deadlines, adheres to a high ethical standard of practice, looking after your best interests and ensuring a smooth transaction. And quite truthfully, buyers who go about it alone typically overpay for properties because they don't have knowledge of the market and what offer prices are and what they should be making and what type of concessions they can get. An agent can help guide that discussion and guide that process. And if there's one thing that I think consumers will probably notice more as a result of this settlement is options. And they will be able to shop for real estate services much like they shop for other services. And you'll probably start to see agents that have different pricing structures based on different services they provide, which is why it's so important to contact a realtor. And that's where you start the process of home buying.